Mike, welcome back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, sir. I hope you're doing well. Thank you again.
Ryan, good afternoon. I love your energy. I love the show's energy. It was just exciting sitting there listening to the lead-ins and everything like that, so I'm thrilled to be here with you.
Well, I mean, as you would expect, we talk college football. I mean, believe it or not, 5 days a week, 4 hours a day. That's 20 hours, 52 weeks out of the year. We talk nothing but Crimson Tide football and college football. That's what you would expect in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, right?
Nothing less, right.
And probably the same thing there in Pennsylvania when you look at Penn State and the rich tradition that you guys have. And I want to talk to you about a lot of different things. You played for a number of years, 8 years there in L.A. for the Rams and played with Eric Dickerson. And certainly I want to get your perspective there. But I want to hear your side of the story. We hear the goal line sand from many of Alabama players, but I'm curious what sticks out and help us walk through from your perspective there.
You know, the years go by. That's certainly true, but, you know, the memories stick pretty strong, you know, especially with situations like that. You know, obviously it was a critical point in the football game. You know, it was one of the most hard-fought football games I've ever been in my life, you know, and that's from both sides of the ball, offense and defense from both Penn State and Alabama. And, you know, the game was getting away from us a little bit, or not getting away, but, you know, we were behind, we were trailing, and, you know, we ended up, I don't even remember the complete circumstances, how we got down there, but, you know, I know Chuck Justina threw a pass to Scott Fitzgerald, and I think Don McNeil was your defensive back at the time. He made a great play and hit on Scott and kept him out of the end zone. You know, we thought he was going to get in, and then we had, you know, not even a foot or a half a foot or so to go to get into the end zone, and thought it would be and not easy, but, you know, you think your chances are pretty good, you know, to get in from there. And, you know, Joe, you know, usually at those times in the ball game, you know, sort of takes over with some play calling. And I don't know if he did on that or not. You know, I don't quite recollect. But Matt Stewie, a very dear friend of mine, you know, carried the ball on third down and, you know, tried to go right up the middle. And I know there were discussions on the sidelines then on fourth down on what do we do. And Joe says, or he did, you know, at the time or afterwards, I think he wanted to do something a little different and sort of run outside, or, you know, do a bootleg, or, you know, one of those types of plays, because Alabama was, I think, sort of anticipating a lot of things up the middle. But I guess he got they all sort of conferred, and everybody came up with, hey, let's go up the middle again. They decided to give the ball to me because I had a little better history of, you know, getting off the ground, you know, trying to jump, you know, type of thing, and being a little farther back, you know, to do that. So we went in and, you know, went with the play, and obviously, you know, Alabama was certainly prepared for it and made a great play. You know, great play by Barry and by all the other guys on that defense, Marty Lyons and that whole crew. You know, you just got to tip your hat to them, and you know, it was very tough at the time. It's even tough now talking about it, but we didn't get in, and obviously it was a key point, the key point in the football game then at that stage.
Mike, I've often heard people talking about it, and I don't know, I'm curious, you're in the backfield, you may or may not be able to hear this, but I think one of the Alabama players, and I don't remember if it was Marty or if it was Barry Krause, looked over and said, you guys better throw the football because you're not going to run it. Do you recall that at all, or do you think that's more of a myth?
No, I don't know. They might have said that. I didn't hear it in the back, you know, where I was. You know, and you got to remember, too, it was so loud. They're in the Superdome, you know, so there's a dome on there, too. And, you know, if you've never been in that place before, and when it gets loud, you could be standing 2 feet from me, and I wouldn't hear a word you're saying. You know, that's how loud it was. You know, so at a key pivotal point in the game, you could just imagine, you know, how the noise level was in that stadium. So from my perspective, you know, maybe they said it to some of the offensive linemen, you know, and maybe they were able to hear that. But where I was, you know, 6.5, 7 yards deep, you know, not a chance.
Well,
Not a chance. I couldn't hear myself think.
yeah, that place is quite loud. I mean, especially when it gets to rocking. And we were talking with one of the players yesterday, and he was talking about, setting the stage. When you look at Coach Paterno, when you look at Bear Bryant, he said, you've got two heavyweights in Penn State and Alabama. And I don't know if you know this, but there's a ton of mutual respect from Alabama players back to Penn State. I mean, when you have them on, I know they're talking from a different perspective, but I think it's the tradition that Alabama players respect. Byron Braggs was with us, and he was talking about how much the Alabama players respect Coach Paterno, and just he said it was a heavyweight fight to the very end. It was. He said, it was harder hits than he'd ever received in some of those games. It's kind of unique to see those two, powers, the bloods of college football going toe to toe.
You look at the uniforms. You look at both pretty plain vanilla. Red and white on Bama side, and blue and white on Penn State side. Not a whole lot of flash, not a whole lot of glimmer. Just sort of is what it is. And, we never had the names on our jerseys, because we always were taught it was, one team, one unit, not one person. And I know it was the same way down there at Alabama, with Bear and, even the people, who have come after him and such too. So I couldn't agree with you more. Even though the outcome didn't go our way, I feel so proud that I had the opportunity to play in that game. And that game goes down as one of the greatest college football games in history. And what's even more ironic about it, in today's day and game, the way that it is, with the scoring and things like that. I mean, who would have thought that a 14-7 game, would end up being one of the greatest games in college football history? Today, the games that are, 30, 40, 50 points almost, up and down the field, and two, titanic defenses, just playing their hearts out, and offenses making enough plays here and there, to get some yards and to get some points, and then have it go down to the bitter end. It doesn't get any better than that. Bear and Joe are probably smiling right now because that's the way they think football, was really meant to be played. And, that's how we both were. They're very, very similar types of schools, Alabama where it is, and, Penn State where it is in the state. There's no pro teams around there. It revolves around the collegiate game, and the fan bases in both are phenomenal. And and it's very similar to what you just said, too. I mean, the respect that we have, for Alabama. I went down there, I think it was, I forget what year we played you guys down there. And you put a pretty good whooping on us. But it was one of Joe's last years, and I went down to the game. And I can't tell you how nice the people from Alabama were. Just any Penn State fan, and many people didn't know who the heck I was or anything walking around campus and walking around the tailgates. But the welcomes that we received, from the fan base, and just say, glad you guys are down there. We love you. I love Joe. And, come on over, have some of our tailgate with us. I mean, it was amazing. It was amazing. My respect just grew from that experience, and my family's respect is, some of my sons and daughters, and my wife was down there with us too. Just grew from that. It's the same thing. We have the utmost respect for you guys.
Yeah, and I believe Don McNeil's nephew, and I'm trying to remember, am I right? Don McNeil's nephew, I think, was on that team, the Penn State team, if I'm not mistaken. I believe.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know that.
Yeah, a couple of years ago. So I think he was one of the guys on the other team there as far as Penn State. So it's funny how even though it's a big world, we're always tied some way. I'm curious because Alabama just went through this with losing to Clemson, and I was in that locker room, and you could hear Nick Saban talking to some of the players. I'm just curious what Coach Paterno told you guys after the game.
It was pretty quiet, and there wasn't a lot said, that I remember. Nothing stands out, completely after that game other than, it was the type of year we had, tried to have us, sort of reflect on the whole season and not just on the one game. But, you live your life to that point in time to get to a moment, where you have an opportunity to do something you dreamed of, which is to win a title. And it's crushing when it doesn't happen. And, Alabama experienced that this year. That's tough. And, as you know, Ryan, the bigger the game, the bigger the moment, the closer the game, the more impactful it is too. If Alabama would have lost to Clemson this year by, if it's 25-7 or whatever, or if we would have lost to Alabama in the Sugar Bowl in '79 and it's 30-6, it hurts. But you know what? All right, you guys are a better team, type of thing. But when it's you're fighting every single play and every snap, every moment means so much, and it comes down to just those few critical moments. I mean, those things never go away. They don't. They don't. You learn to live with it, but they're there with you for the rest of your life. The good times and the bad. But like I said, it was just an honor being in the game. And I wish it would have turned out differently, but it didn't. That's why you play.
Can you help us, because we love to hear Coach Bryant's stories? I'm just curious, because you got to remember, we probably don't know a lot of Coach Paterno's stories. Can you share one with us, maybe just of his, just something that sticks out to you about Coach Paterno?
Well, when I was there with, Joe was, I'm sure, very much like Bear, a very tough guy to play for, very difficult guy to play for. Very demanding, demanded a lot. But, there was a human side to him, too. And, I remember what got us into that national championship game was, we had to beat Pitt, who was pretty good at the time, at home, right around Thanksgiving to have a chance to play for the title. So I remember we had our last practice prior to the Pitt game, and I was walking with a couple of buddies, back to our dorms, which was way on the other end of campus. And we're walking, and, this car comes by and it pulls over, and the window rolls down, and this high, squeaky voice goes, "Hey, come on, guys, hop in. I'll give you a ride back." And it was Joe. And, that never really happened before. So we go, okay, I guess we better go in. So we get in the car, and, he's chit-chatting, just, talking, and he looked at me, and he says, I got a real good feeling about this football game and about you're going to have a great game in this game. And he said, I just got a feeling, you've practiced really hard all week and we're ready to play, and I know you're really ready to play. And he said, go get some rest, and now we'll get ready to, get out of town tomorrow, or to get ready for the game one more day. And I remember just how I felt after that, the confidence that I had, and I ended up having a pretty good game. I think I had 2 touchdowns in the game, and it was a tight game with them, but I was able to score the winning touchdown, unlike the Sugar Bowl, to allow us to go undefeated and be 11-0 and be in end of the season the number 1 ranked team in the country, and then deciding who we were going to play. But, that sort of showed, just the subtleness of him and how he knew which buttons to push and when to do it and how to do it, to allow you to have the confidence to go do what you wanted to do.
Final question. We're right now talking to Mike Guman as we look at the Penn State running back for several years there. Let me travel to the NFL side of things and look at Eric Dickerson and what he was able to accomplish playing with him. Certainly one of the all-time legends when you think about running backs in the NFL and the college game as well.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I was there for a couple of years, and then in 1983, when John Robinson came on as our head coach, the former USC coach, we had the number 3 pick in the draft that year. And, John's history at USC is, run the football, with the Heisman Trophy winners that have come out of there, and, John McKay and that whole history of running at USC. He wanted a guy that he knew he could depend upon, who could be dynamic. So they took Eric out of SMU in the 3rd round. Or 3rd pick, excuse me. And, Eric always carried himself very well. He was a very, very confident guy. But, in my career and lifetime as a player, probably the most talented player I ever played with in my life. I mean, he just was by far, he was a stallion, when you think of it. And that was back in the day when running backs were a little taller. Eric is a good 6'3". And, a lot of guys in that era were sort of around bigger too, around that size. And, just how you watched how he practiced, how he ran the ball, the speed, acceleration, explosiveness, power. He had that combination that, you see once in a generation or once in a decade, in college football and in the NFL. And it was a pleasure and an honor and a treat, to play with him and to block for him. You didn't have to, if you just did your job pretty well, he could make you look awfully good.
Well, listen, not only do we promote the game of football, we have a fullback that does a regular segment on Fridays with us. He also part of Alabama. He won a championship in '92. He does a morning show here. So he's probably going to be texting me here in the next couple of minutes. Thanks for promoting fullbacks, guys that do the hard work. I mean, listen, man, he's a fullback. He thinks it's like an instinct. But you think about '92, he was the second leading rusher on that championship team. And now
wow.
You explain the kids what a fullback is. They're like, huh?
They don't even know what that is.